Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. With that, we have another stalwart from the banking and financial services sector. And it's an honor and privilege to welcome Anugratha Biswas, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, Airtel Payments Bank, who will share his insights on the digitalization journey, scaling innovation to build a truly digital bank. And to engage him in this conversation, we once again have Sanjay Doshi, Partner and Head, Financial Services Advisory, KPMG. Sanjay, the virtual floor is all yours.
Thank you, Ivan, and good morning, Anugratha.
Good morning, Sanjay. Ivan, thank you for your very kind words. I'm really looking forward to the session, Sanjay.
Absolutely, and I think a lot to talk about, given how things have moved. If I have to really go back post demonetization, where you will know more how digital payments, got a good support. But of course, COVID has really pushed digitalization across all the spectrum of financial services. So, Anugratha, your quick thoughts on the future of the entire financial ecosystem. What are the different strategies which you believe are going to evolve to really, have very innovative kind of digital transformation happening in the financial ecosystem?
So, our context is a little different. I must admit that I haven't really participated in the previous sessions, but the word transformation, I would just sort of morph into saying, what does it take to build a digital first company? I mean, Ivan, that the payments bank category was a relatively new category. Licenses came out in 2016 and operations really started in a sensible way in 2018. And therefore, payment banks, or at least our bank, Airtel Payments Bank, had the luxury, I would say, of thinking about being digital first.
That's right.
And therefore building it. And if I look back at our journey, I would say there are three big levers which one could take as a pivot to build strategies. The first is a slightly external lens, and just stop me wherever I'm boring you, but I'll just jump straight into it. The first is an external pivot, which is basically how does a company and how does the company look at what's happening outside in the country, and really what is the company's view on digital India. For us, the learning was, I would say, slightly non-obvious. There's the old chestnut of consumer behavior changing very rapidly post demonetization and COVID and lots of digitization happening. And the fact is, it is true, right? But if you look at a company gearing up to ride that wave, it's still predictable. You have to come out with a set of options which are digital. You have to think about how to eliminate paper and so on and so forth. But what we observed is that actually, if you look at the evolution of the New India stack, which is, the Aadhaar, which is the mobile phone, and which is various capabilities built on top. A couple of them are BBPS, a couple of them are FASTag. New businesses are actually coming out at a very disruptive pace. Right. To give you an example, biometric authenticated transactions in rural India today is an over 25,000 crore monthly market. This didn't even exist in a sensible way 5 years back. So the way then the company needs to really think about it, and the way we went about it, is to say we need to take early bets and put in upfront investments, because when the disruption happens, you don't want to be playing catch up. And that's where, the entire journey of the company from 2017 has been, how do you build out platforms? How do you build out technology infrastructure so that when various trends happen, you are ahead of the curve in terms of launching new products. So we were, I would say, for a company of relative vintage, which is lower, able to scale pretty fast. We've got 6.5% market share in Aadhaar-enabled payment systems. We are on the top 5 in FASTag issuance in the country. We are one of the 7 largest UPI payment apps in the country. So looking at the trends ahead, right? NCMC coming up, which is going to really transform mass transit, account aggregators and the data protection bill, which is really going to transform consent frameworks and how sales happens fundamentally, 5G and IoT and how the business will be driven as a consequence of that. needs upfront investments without much potential business, possibly for that financial year. But that's a call which the company took and is committed. That's the first pivot, really. The
Right.
second pivot is, how does one really look at the business model from a digital lens, right? And let me explain what I mean. I mean, on a business model, you've got like the most obvious thing of revenue and costs, right? Now, India's evolved very rapidly, uniquely in the country to having a very solid public digital infrastructure. And the Aadhaar framework is fundamentally a public infrastructure. And the uniqueness of any product or any platform which is public is that certainly costs move down, which is very important for a country to rapidly take advantage. But equally, revenue upsides become very limited. The UPI
Right.
MDR and the MDR being zero is a classic example of that.
That's right.
So the first implication of this is that one must envision a model where the cost per transaction are really scalable in a country where you have to think billions of transactions. Just to give you a sense, today, Airtel Payment Bank is now close to processing annually 5 billion transactions. And our cost of transaction is now at a rupee. I would dare say that, when we finally envisage scale and we are growing, roughly doubling every 18 months, it would be costs of tens of paisa, which is what NPCI is at.
Right.
That's the first thing, right? Public infrastructure driven framework and therefore cost per transaction is extremely important.
Right.
And the second angle there is how do you look at revenues, which is really the theme of this conference, which is how do you really build differentiation in a tangible way?
Right.
So that consumer uptake and therefore consequently revenues is good. And
Right.
there I want to give an example like what we realized quickly in the digital payment infrastructure, or at least in the system, is that while payments have gone up and the numbers are staggering, and I'm not going to bore everybody with like the market numbers, but frauds have also gone up. One survey we did said that 57% of tier 2 and tier 3 users do not use digital payments because they are afraid of their account being taken over.
Right.
And this, Sanjay, is in the context of roughly 250 million people in the country who use smartphones but don't use digital payments.
Right.
Right. So that's the opportunity for us. And we came up with a really unique third layer authentication product, which is world first actually. And in partnership with Airtel. Airtel, of course, developed the technology, to deliver this, but we worked closely. We were the first bank to go live on it. And it's a very unique product where before a payment actually gets debited from an Airtel payment bank account, the SIM network layer is used to serve a message on the customer's phone without an app. And the customer has to actually decline or accept the transaction. And it literally says your account is about to get debited for so and so
Through the
purpose.
SMS you are saying. So you don't really need to have net connection.
Yeah. So you just need a telecom network really. And it works, of course, on the Airtel network. But just imagine the power of this. Today, we've got close to actually over 800,000 active users on this product. We process over a run rate of 3 million transactions a month, where consumers use it regularly. And that's the consequence. I mean, if you are coming up with a product which is really tied to consumer needs, which in this case it was, the macro is very obvious, we see revenues from these set of customers are 3 to 4 times that of our normal customers. And
but
that
actually,
actually,
as part of what you are discussing, think about it. A few years back, we were talking about financial inclusion and microfinance being the biggest financial inclusion, but from a lending side. Now, payments, what you're talking, this is all people who are probably not part of the banking system or bottom of the pyramid, etc. The one big element which is coming out from what you are saying is the data around it and how this data can be, leveraged. Because I don't think the data for such customers was available. And that's why the entire data is becoming a big forte
no,
as well.
you're absolutely right. And I think that's a very good segue on the digital business pivot in itself. Just a quick clarification, right? We've got two large businesses. One is a business which is really focused on inclusion, tier 3 plus. We bank 1 in 6 villages in the country today in terms of distribution scale. We've got 315,000 active banking points, which is double the number of bank branches in the country. But equally, we have a very large digital banking business. We are actually one of the fastest growing digital banks in the country. And we see that our primary users are this metro, tier one, tier two, who are concerned about safety, like value, right? And as a payments bank, given that we can't lend, our thought has always been to do a transaction first model.
Right.
So just I'll give you one example. Like we've got a product called Rewards 123. Yeah. It basically upfronts a customer's intent to use the account and asks for a fee. It's an annual fee. It's a very simple product. 123 stands for 1% off if you load money, 2% off if you shop online, 3% off on any telecom bill. 1, 2, 3. And this is fundamentally built on the long tail of customer behavior of how they use products digitally. We've already got 250,000 subscribers on it. And in terms of scale, these are again 3 to 4 times the revenue multiple of a normal customer. This thought process is only possible for a payments bank because by definition you can't lend. And therefore now, as you very rightly pointed out, the opportunity for us, because we've got rich transaction data from this set, the safety users,
absolutely,
value users, gives us the opportunity to really think confidently about increasing revenue from the users. And I probably sounding a little commercial, but if you just convert it, equally the customer gets genuine value, which he's not getting from the banking industry today.
Let's be honest, I don't think you're sounding commercial, because every business needs to have a good unit economics, because that helps to service the customer better. Your point, otherwise it's just a question of time when you will not be able to service the customer, right? So
well, absolutely. And that's where I think this conversation which we are having, Sanjay, in terms of the commercial aspect of it and the value delivery. I mean, right now Airtel broadly, right? Airtel Payments Bank broadly has 6.5 crore user base active.
Right.
Around 38 million monthly transacting users. And we do a gross merchandise value of give or take anywhere between 13 to 14,000 crores a month. So the business is at scale, which is important because the third pivot, Sanjay, which I just want to cover, is this issue of how do you build this with a committed team? Like how do you build a digital culture, which is like...
Let's going to come to that. Absolutely.
So let me touch on like our observations and our thoughts, because, I feel quite privileged that, I'm part of this company with a very high quality board really governing the strategy. But in terms of the execution, we had two very powerful insights when we started to build a digital company. The one is that we quickly realized that, attractive onboarding items like, iPads and motorcycles or motorbikes are actually not the prime reason why people get engaged to technology companies.
Right.
What people are fundamentally very excited about is how committed is the company towards using technology to solve real problems of scale. And there, our opportunity is very unique because, as I mentioned, on the digital side, you've got an opportunity of converting 200 to 50 million people into digital payments and therefore digital financial services. It's a big problem to solve for, because the reality is that, it's not growing very fast. I mean, the number of digital paying users uniquely is now at around 230, 240 million. The second big problem is that you've got a country which is fundamentally starved of access. So you've got 300 million people in India where the average distance of a bank branch is 11 kilometers and above. And therefore, how do you use technology to drive down cost per transactions and then like the banking services right at their doorstep? So this we realized was a very, very attractive theme for people to come in and start getting engaged and connected, which was one insight I wanted to share. And the other insight with that, again, as I mentioned, very candidly, it is almost impossible to build a digital company top down. So, classically, you will see projects happening in banking sectors where there is a homepage revamp of an app, right? There'll be an external consultant employed, and then very senior people will look at that interface and say, this is good or this is bad. But we realize that just doesn't work. What you really need is a deeply engaged team who are committed to being customer first, running very quick agile experiments in terms of what is working, what are the consumer problems they're solving for, how does the consumer behave when he's hitting and touching that, who's the consumer to begin with, and then building a good user experience. And that's what I mean as the difference between a user interface and a user experience. Because in a user experience, you're trying to solve for the problem of the customer,
The
who in
customer.
our case are very different sub-profiles. And then how do you build out the app for that? So we are just in the process of moving to what I call a fully world-class neo-banking architecture. You will see the banking section of our bank on Airtel Thanks completely move to being what we would call a bank modeled in the likes of Monzo and Revolut. But that entire interface has come bottoms up and not
Right,
top,
right. I don't know, some
right?
of you reading my mind. I was going to ask on digital workforce. The second word in my mind was neobanks. What do you think about many players, right? Many of the technology players who are probably SaaS models or even BaaS kind of models really coming up as neobanks is what typically being used as a common term. What are your thoughts around it?
Yeah, look, the issue is fundamentally the same. I mean, what's the digital business model, right? And the argument really for a neobank is that you're able to deliver a better experience. And the hypothesis, the argument is well established, but the hypothesis is that argument, once proven, will result in a sustainable business model,
Right.
right? It's difficult to do that if you don't have a banking license, because you don't have access to the revenue streams of banking deposits,
Absolutely.
right? So then by argument, I mean, of course, you can carve out revenue shares with the banks whom you source deposits for, but it's never going to be substantial enough.
That's
Simply do the maths on this. Like, if you average the top 150 million people in the country deliver broadly a 6,000 rupees of revenue per year.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at an individual level to the bank. Now, this 6,000 rupees broadly is constructed as a third. A third from deposits, a third from lending, and a third from other products. So you've got a third of revenue straight out, and you're never going to be able to get anywhere the other third of cross sell in a very deep and significant way, which means you'll have to go lend first, and which is where the credit card model might possibly work. Players which are out there who are offering a credit card first as a banking service, as opposed to a liability product. So I would argue that in this context, what we have observed from our customers is that payment banks are seeing sharp uptake in deposits and digital banking customers, simply because consumers are comfortable choosing a secondary bank account for their digital payments
That's right.
instead of the first. And that's where we are doubling down on this product which I just described, which is called Safe Pay.
Safe.
And then on top of it, how do you build the user experience as opposed to the user interface, and therefore get incremental revenue? So I would say, you can call us a neobank, but we are a bank, and we are one of the fastest growing digital banks in the country. And that itself is a hypothesis. By the way, Sanjay, we turned profitable this year.
Yeah, I
So
know. Absolutely. Congratulations.
yeah, so like this multi-segment approach, we are actually India's only profitable growing fintech.
Yes.
That's really the question to answer, out of all this. Like, how do you prove the hypothesis that neobanking results in a sustainable business model? And my argument is that, we've already proven it.
Right. No, I think three takeaway points from our conversation. One is customer experience, which is definitely stressed by most of the speakers. Second, which you brought the most relevant point, I think the entire unit economy. I would really not say the commercialization, etc., but it's the business has to run on a positive unit economics, and that's a second big thing. Third is, or probably I'll add one more after this. Third is the workforce, and fourth is the entire cyber concerns. which is where I think organizations like you all really come in and give that assurance to the customer. So thank you very much. And back to Ivan. Ivan, you're on mute.
Thanks, Sanjay. What an amazing perspective. We had Moa first with her views on the digitalization journey, scaling innovation to build a truly digital bank. And now we had Anugratha with his views and some very interesting points. I think you summed it up very well, Sanjay. Anugratha, congratulations on turning profitable. Thank you for your time. We wish you and Airtel Payments Bank the very best going forward. And thank you, Sanjay, for engaging Anugratha in this very, very interesting conversation over the last 20 minutes.
Delighted, Ivan. Thank you. And thanks to ET for inviting me for this.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we move on to the next session, please do visit our partner booths where you can interact, chat, or video call any of our partners. Do visit the photo booth where you can take a selfie. Go to the Twitter wall, please, and you stand to get an Amazon voucher. So kindly do this in the break between sessions. Do stay tuned in. We will be back shortly with the next session, which is a fireside chat.